Well, hi, and welcome back as we continue in our journey in the book of Matthew together. And we get a little bit of a sneak peek at Christmas as we get started with our new book study in the book of Matthew. This week is Matthew chapter 2, and it's highlighted by the visit of the Magi and the massacre of Bethlehem. And as I was thinking about this week, I was trying to really wrap my mind around, for us now, what does this story really mean, and where is the meaning for us today? And I started to think that the Magi all brought different gifts to the young king to pay homage and respect. And then God used those gifts for the journey that they had ahead and the trials that would come for Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. And I started to think about, what gifts do you bring Jesus this Christmas? What gifts do I bring to the Messiah this Christmas season? And since we're not in Christmas yet, it's okay to talk about these things and start thinking and planning ahead a little bit. Carrie was asking me the age-old question as we looked at our calendars and realized that Christmas is just around the corner. We're optimists. What can I say? It is just around the corner. A mere 6 weeks away. And we started asking, the questions. Well, what should we do for the kids this year, and what do they want, and some of these kind of things, and how do we hide our purchases from them, as they're super smart teenagers and adults now, and we all use the same Amazon accounts and things like that. So we started thinking a little bit about what gifts we would give to each other, what gifts we would give to the children, and talking about things like that. And I wonder if this Christmas season it's okay for us to also come to the table and say, what gifts do we bring to Jesus this year? What is it that he wants? What is it? What do you get the person who literally has everything? Well, you don't come empty-handed, that's for sure. I was thinking about Christmas during grade school, and I remember my first grade school Christmas that I can remember. I was in first grade, and I can remember this vividly because I had just learned that if you kissed girls that were standing underneath the mistletoe, that was allowed, that was okay. And I really wanted to kiss a girl. So I decided, being in first grade, quite the man of the world that I was, to skip the whole mistletoe, whatever that stuff was, phase, and go straight to just jumping up and kissing a girl because it was Christmas. And so as we marched on towards Christmas break, I worked up my nerve, and one fine, bright winter's morning, I remember sitting in my little row at my desk, and I remember watching Kathy Heyer get up and go to the teacher's desk and ask her a question, and I realized, aha, now is my moment. And so as she came walking back down my row, I jumped out of my desk and planted a big, fat, wet one right on her cheek. It was my first kiss from a girl. Well, kind of. It was also my first slap, and she turned around and slapped me right across the face, and I was so shocked I didn't know what to do. Caused a scene, sat down, and began to cry a little bit because my heart was broken. So much for my first kiss. And then I was thinking about, in grade school, the romance around Christmas time. I don't know if it was like this for you guys around Christmas, but it was such a big deal, in elementary school, when we would be going steady with another girl or boy, and I remember there was so much pressure around the holidays to buy a Christmas gift that reflected just exactly how you felt about this other person. And so, we had to take some things into consideration. We had to make sure and get something that we knew they would like. If it was clothing, we had to make sure it would fit. You couldn't give a bad gift to your significant other because that you were guaranteed going to get a divorce paperwork coming around New Year's when school got back in session. It was a big deal what gifts we gave. The go-to gift I can still remember was the giant Hershey's Kiss. You've seen the giant Hershey's Kiss? Yeah, they were, I remember thinking when I was in grade school they were about $5, which was a fortune back then, but it was about what we could scramble together for Christmas gifts. And so that was my go-to gift when I was in elementary school for my girlfriend's Christmas presents. But the funny thing was with these Christmas presents, no matter what you gave, it all came down to how much you spent on it. We were well aware of what things cost in elementary school and who gave good gifts and who didn't. And so you always were judged by your peers based on what kind of gift you gave and whether or not it met the threshold or criteria for what was acceptable and a good gift. It didn't really matter so much what your girlfriend at the time thought, because really this was all for public show anyway. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just trying to keep up with the Joneses. Because even as an elementary school kid, I knew that everyday gifts just don't cut it at Christmas time. It had to be something special, because Christmas is about the sacred. It's where the everyday simply just won't do. That's why we don't buy appliances for our ladies at Christmas, fellas. Take it from me. All right, this morning we're going to take a look at the gifts of the Magi in Matthew 2 and unpack that a little bit and see what was really going on there. But I wonder, as we near the Advent season, what we will bring to Jesus this year, what we will bring to Jesus this year. Amidst coronavirus and lockdowns, fears and insecurity, what do we have to offer Jesus this Christmas season? Well, let's dive into our scripture this morning. It comes from Matthew chapter 2. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and put your fingers there. Matthew chapter 2, starting with verse 1. It says, Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. About that time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." So who are these visitors from the east? And this kind of bizarre introduction to Jesus as King of Kings and King of the Jews. Well, unlike the songs that we sing, they weren't kings. Matthew calls them magi. So they are magicians or astronomers, wise men from the east, probably from Persia. What we know about them is that they are extremely well connected, and they are extremely wealthy apparently, because the journey didn't seem to set them back any. And they brought some pretty elaborate gifts. Now it's interesting, one of the things that is talked about here is the astronomy and the lining up of astrological signs to point to a conclusion. For us, unless you're really into horoscopes and you really buy into that kind of stuff, it really doesn't play into our everyday life. The movement of the stars and planets and how things relate between the heavens and the earth doesn't really come into play for us. But for those people back in those days, a significant earthly event would be reflected, they thought, by a significant heavenly event. And in this case, they were right. One of the things that's interesting about astronomy and astrology is that because the stars and planets move in such crisp and distinctive patterns and timings, you can reverse engineer a little bit backwards and figure out when the last time Halley's Comet came around, or what was going on at this time as far as the stars were concerned. And 3 times in 7 BC, Jupiter and Saturn were in perfect alignment, which would have created a very bright star-like kind of image. Now, what's interesting is the Persians believed, along with many people, that Jupiter, the planet Jupiter, was reminiscent of, or was equal to being a king, or was the sign for the kingly planet. And the Persians believed that Saturn reflected the Jews. And so, if Jupiter and Saturn came together in alignment at some point during that time, and that's what these magi were noticing, it would have been very natural for them to assume that the king of the Jews, or a significant king of the Jews, had just been born or died, something along those lines. So they go to the palace, assuming this is a big deal, and they want to see the babe. But God didn't come to us in a palace in fine robes through the lines of kings like that. He comes to us in a dirty stable. Aristocrats and governors will not celebrate his birth, but angels and shepherds will. King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. He called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of the religious law and asked, "Where is the Messiah supposed to be born?" "In Bethlehem in Judea," they said, "for this is what the prophet wrote. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not least among the ruling cities of Judah. For a ruler will come from you, who will be the shepherd of my people Israel. Well, it says King Herod was deeply disturbed. Why? Well, to understand that, we need to understand a little bit about King Herod. King Herod was not the rightful king of the Jews. When the Magi show up at his doorstep and say they've come to honor the newborn king of the Jews, this would send some shockwaves through Jerusalem. So when it says that he was deeply disturbed, as was everyone in Jerusalem, it's understandable. Herod was a violent man, and not above using violence to get what he wanted and to achieve his means. He was also very paranoid. So what we see coming up later fits the bill pretty solidly with the rest of his MO. It means that there's another king of the Jews, that Herod is not the true king, he's the usurper. And this is a major kind of paranoia, maybe would be the right word for it, for Herod and for Herod's family. They're always wanting to be seen as the real kings of the Jews, despite the fact that they're not Jewish, they're Arab. His family is Arab. They won their power by being loyal to Rome, and by moving up the ranks of Rome. Herod is ultimately the friend of Mark Antony, and has Mark Antony's backing as he becomes the king of the Jews. But ultimately, Octavius Caesar and Mark Antony are going to have a big falling out. Octavius is going to win and take over ruling command. And Herod, being a political animal, vows to be as loyal to Octavius as he was to Mark Antony. And so Herod keeps his seat, keeps his skin, and is a faithful man of Rome. But he is not a Jewish man. By some accounts, it showed that he tried to follow a lot of the Jewish customs and a lot of the Jewish traditions, except for when it was really inconvenient for him, or when he just wanted to kill someone and get them out of the way. He'll kill his wife. He'll kill several of his children. He'll concoct a plot to murder the Sanhedrin that opposed him. At one point, some young disciples take down a golden Roman eagle that he had placed in the temple courts. These zealous Jewish disciples run off with it, and Herod finds them and has them executed for it. When he's on his deathbed, he asks that the leading citizens of Jericho be arrested and put to death upon his death, so that there would be genuine grieving at his funeral. Not a good guy. But totally believable if we understand who Herod is, what comes next. Let's keep going. Then Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the star first appeared. Then he told them, "Go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child, and when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can go and worship him too." After this interview, the wise men went their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the palace where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. When they opened their treasure chests and gave him gifts, of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. When it was time to leave, they returned to their own country by another route, for God had warned them in a dream not to return to Herod. So the wise men are actually pretty wise after all. They figure out what's going on there. Matthew says God sends a dream and warns them, but they put the pieces together that Herod is not to be trusted, and so they come and they worship Jesus, not in the place I'm sure they were expecting him, but in a lowly house. And when they come, they bring him gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These are gifts for a king or a god. These are incredibly expensive gifts, the kind that are not thrown around half-heartedly. I wonder what the Magi thought as they wound their way through Bethlehem, following the star and following the instructions of the new baby that was born, up to the house where Mary, Joseph, and Jesus were staying. Now keep in mind here, it doesn't quite work like it does in our Christmas story specials that we see on TV and things like that. The Magi don't show up at the stable in Bethlehem. Mary and Joseph have Jesus in Bethlehem, and they stay on in Bethlehem until it's time to leave Bethlehem and run to Egypt. I wonder if sometimes we want Jesus to be someone he isn't. They wanted him to be a king in a palace, to have the pedigree and the line, to be born from kings. And Jesus has the pedigree, unbeknownst to us, except for we just have chapter 1, which was the genealogy that shows he's from the line of David. But here is a child born in poverty in a city that's not their hometown. And I wonder if that's what the Magi expected. Were they blown away by this? I wonder if sometimes we want Jesus to be someone he isn't. Or are we content with who he is, who Jesus really is? Sometimes I think we want Jesus to be a little less involved in our lives, a little less in control, a little less in authority. And other times we want him to be desperately in control. We need him to be Lord of our life. We have no place else to go. And it seems like there's this tug of war, this push and pull that goes on in our souls between wanting Jesus to be everything that we need him to be, but then stifling Jesus a little bit when he gets beyond the boundaries that we have set for him, if such things were even possible. What gift would you bring Jesus? Maybe a better question, what gift will you bring Jesus this Advent season? Because I think it's important for us that we still are gift givers and that we don't neglect God in our gift giving. A preaching professor at Harvard University tells the story of the year his 5-year-old son was working on an art project in his kindergarten class. It was made of plaster, resembled nothing in particular, but with some paint, sparkle, and time in a kiln, it was ready to be wrapped as a gift. He wrapped it himself and was beside himself with excitement. It would be a gift for his father, one 3 months in the making. Early in December, when the child could hardly contain the secret, the last day of school finally came. All the parents arrived for the big Christmas play, and when the students left for home, they were finally allowed to take their ceramic presents home. The professor's son secured his gift, ran towards his parents, tripped, and fell to the floor. The gift went airborne, and when it landed on the cafeteria floor, the shattering sound stopped all conversations. It was perfectly quiet for a moment, as all involved considered the magnitude of the loss. For a 5-year-old, there had never been a more expensive gift. He crumpled down on the floor next to his broken gift and started crying. Both parents rushed to their son, but the father was uncomfortable with the moment. People were watching. His son was crying. He patted the boy on the head and said, "Son, it's okay. It doesn't matter." His wife glared at the great professor. "Oh, yes, it matters," she said to both her men. "Oh, yes, it does matter." She cradled her son in her arms, rocked him back and forth, and cried with him. In a few minutes, the crying ceased. "Now," said the mother, "let's go home and see what can be made with what's left." And so, with mother's magic and a glue gun, they put together, from the broken pieces, a multicolored butterfly. Amazingly, the artwork after the tragedy was actually more beautiful than what it had been in a pre-broken state. At Christmas, the gift was finally given, and as long as he taught at Harvard, the professor kept the butterfly on his desk. It was a constant reminder that grief is real and that loss hurts. It's also a reminder that from great loss, great beauty can eventually emerge. For some of us this year, you might be giving the gift of grief. Doesn't sound like much of a gift to give, but it is an incredible gift to give that to Christ, to give that to the Lord, and to allow the Lord to share in your grief with you, to be present in the moment of your grief. I know we've lost some folks along the way this year, and last year, and the year before. And it doesn't get any easier. But maybe this year, we invite Christ into our grief around the holiday seasons as we celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas and we spend time with our families. Those times when loss is the most poignant. Perhaps in those times this year, we'll allow Christ to heal us, to share in our grieving. Giving good gifts is a bit of an art form, really, when you think about it. You have to know something of the person. You have to know what they like, what excites them, what annoys them, what puts them off. It has to come from the heart. You can't just check a box and consider that gift that's taken care of, that person's covered. Good gift giving comes from the heart. It doesn't need to be expensive, but the gift should be deeply valuable to the giver and to the one who receives it. It should bring them joy, even if you are less than thrilled with it. It's not about the gift that you give, it's about the gift that they get. And the joy that they find in the gift that they give, and the way that it was given, and the giver. In short, when we give good gifts, we give a piece of ourselves to the recipient. So what would you give to Jesus this year? That may sound kind of corny, but I think the reality is there's only one thing he truly, really wants, and that's our hearts. It's the one thing that is ever elusive to him, and it's the one thing that he truly desires. St. Augustine said, "Thou hast made us for thyself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it finds its rest in thee." You see, if we're willing to give Jesus our heart, willing to care about what he cares about, our hopes, our dreams, our fears, our anxiety, our mind and our soul will follow suit. But it starts with the heart and being willing to allow Jesus to control of the heart. Lead me where you will, take me where you will, Lord, is the cry of a Christian heart. This is what God desires, not our clenching and grasping, our worrying and our anxieties. He doesn't want this. He just wants our hearts. With all of the broken pieces in it, with all of the hurt and tragedy laced within it, God wants our hearts so that we can begin to dream God-like dreams, and we begin to see things and see the world through his eyes and in his way. We can't give token gifts to God. He wants our whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. It's a package deal. All right, and now we get to the rest of the story. What else happens in chapter 2? The wise men go home, albeit a different route. And what happens? Well, an angel comes and warns Joseph again. Just like in chapter 1, it's an angel that comes in a dream and warns Joseph to take Jesus and Mary and flee to Egypt because Herod's in a killing mood. When Herod is furious when he finds out that he's been duped by the wise men, and so he sends his soldiers to Bethlehem and orders them to kill all the baby boys 2 years old and younger throughout there. Matthew quotes Jeremiah to again point us to the fact that prophecy is being fulfilled in the midst of this dark time. And we're left with two stark figures, the worshiping magi and the murderous king. Each wants to find Jesus for their own reasons. And I'm wondering this morning, where do you need Jesus in your life this Christmas? Where is it that you need him the most? He's waiting there to be your hope and your peace. This Christmas season is already one for the history books with COVID. But what makes this year, but what if this was the year that your walk with Jesus really went to that next level? What if you really began to take Jesus at his word and trust in him completely with everything in your life? What if this were the year of breakouts instead of breakdowns? What if now is the time for you to take the next step of faith with Jesus? And what is that next step of faith? See, I think this is something that you and God know. If you're like me, it takes a while to take that step. I put my toe in the water, test the temperature a little bit, tease, pull it in, pull it out, before I finally take that leap of faith and dive in. Christ comes and gives us the greatest gift of all. Jesus coming is God's gift to the world of life and hope and peace. This is what the world had been waiting for since its inception. This was the moment that men and women of old had longed for and pined for, that one day God would make things right. And the beginning of the kingdom of heaven and the beginning of God making things right in the world begins with Jesus coming as a little baby. He takes that gift of the kingdom of heaven and shares it with us and invites us to be a part of it. He invites us to share and steward that gift in our lives, to be about Him and His kingdom's business. How can we stewardship the gift, this incredible gift of God? How can we make something important out of it? How can we make something meaningful, something powerful out of it? Rather than just trusting that one day when I die, God's going to take care of me and go to heaven. How can it change our life right now in ways that are incredible and life-altering? We have to steward the gift. We have to take seriously the gift that God gives us at Christmas time in this gift of this Messiah. To not banter about like it's no big deal, but to understand that Jesus coming is everything. We need to stewardship it well. One of my professors in seminary shared a story. He says, "This story is well known in my family. My grandparents had driven up from California the evening before. Stopping at a gas station along the Oregon border, they purchased some snacks, gas, and as they often did, a lottery ticket. Thinking little of it, they stuffed the ticket in a pocket and continued journeying north. At their hotel that night, Grandpa stayed up to watch the news. The lottery numbers were to be announced. As the numbers were picked from a whirling globe of balls, the first number matched, and the second number, then the third number. At this point, he shakes Grandma awake. She wipes her eyes as they watch the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh numbers match. All 7 numbers, jaws dropped. Their minds could not ascertain what had transpired in just a few short seconds. Unimaginable, unthinkable. How much did they win? What does this mean? The host announced the winning amount. That night, Grandma and Grandpa won $4.6 million. After a sleepless night, they drove to our home and placed the lottery ticket on our dining room table. The winnings helped our family in profound ways. Debts were paid, vacations were had, tuitions were covered. But the story has a dark side. A profound gift that created momentary bliss eventually led to bickering, infighting, and anger in the family. After nearly 50 years of marriage, Grandma and Grandpa's marriage ended. Family members stopped talking, and a cold bitterness took over. I don't retell this difficult story to shame a single soul. By the grace of God, healing and reconciliation has begun in our family. Yet the fact remains, no one knew how to steward such a gift." If you had everything in the world but didn't have Jesus, what a sorry soul you would be. And if you have Jesus, you have the greatest gift in the whole world. You have the pearl of great price. You have the greatest gift you'll ever need, the only gift you'll ever need. So as we get ready to celebrate this season and we look ahead to Advent, my question remains, what gift will you give to Jesus this Advent season? It could be something concrete. It could be something that's just between you and God. It could be an act of love, an act of kindness, an act of unrequited mercy. But I invite you, while you're making your list and you're planning out your Christmas this year, and you're thinking of your holidays and Thanksgiving and Christmas that are coming up, I invite you to make Christ a part of it. What are you thankful for in Christ? And share that with your family. What are you giving to Christ this Christmas season? Share that with your family and encourage them to do the same. All right, that's it for today. Hope you guys have a wonderful Lord's Day. I love you and God bless you. See you later.